All right, let's jump right in. We're here to talk about the new U.S. reciprocal tariffs. But we're not going to just list the problems. We're going to give you a clear, actionable playbook to help you turn what looks like a huge business challenge into a real strategic advantage. So let me guess. The new U.S. tariffs are probably starting to cause some serious headaches, right? Hitting your supply chain, messing with your bottom line. You're definitely not alone. But don't worry. We're about to walk through the exact countermeasures you need. This is your playbook. So let's get into it. Here's the game plan. First, we'll get the lay of the land, the new tariff landscape. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the key rules you need to know. From there, we map out an immediate 90-day action plan. Then we'll zoom out to build a resilient long-term strategy. And finally, we'll put it all together to show you how to flip this whole threat into a massive advantage. Okay, first things first, we have to understand what we're up against. Think of this new tariff environment as a pretty serious storm rolling in. And to navigate any storm, you first have to understand its size, its power, and where it's coming from. So here's the crucial thing to get. This isn't just one simple, flat tax. It's a two-part system that's going to be effective April 2025. You've got a 10% baseline tariff on pretty much all imports. But, and this is the real kicker, on top of that, there are additional country-specific duties that can shift around based on U.S. foreign policy. That two-layer structure is what makes this so tricky to handle. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. Just look at these numbers. The total effective rate isn't trivial. If you're importing from Taiwan or Vietnam, you're suddenly looking at a 30% tariff. From the UK, it's 20%. These differences are huge, and they can completely change the economics of your sourcing decisions overnight. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Can I just reroute my shipments through a different country to dodge these rates? Well, you need to be really, really careful with that. Getting caught for what's called tariff circumvention comes with a massive 40% penalty tariff. It is absolutely not a risk worth taking. You need a proper strategy, not a risky shortcut. Okay, so we understand the storm. Now we need our compass. This next part is all about the key rules, the exemptions, and the little legal details that will guide your strategy. This isn't just about compliance. It's about finding hidden opportunities.
Now, listen up because this is a really important point that trips a lot of people up. You've got the existing 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, and then you have these new reciprocal tariffs. The key takeaway is simple. They do not overlap. If your product is already being hit by those 232 tariffs, you are actually exempt from these new ones. It's one or the other, not both.
And this is where you can start finding some real opportunities. These are the levers you can pull right now. Sourcing from the EU? Your total tariff is capped at 15%. That's a big deal. Manufacturing in Canada or Mexico, you're completely exempt thanks to USMCA. And you absolutely cannot forget the 20% rule for US components. If your product is more than 20% US made by value, that portion is excluded from the calculation. That can save you a lot of money. Now, to make things more interesting, there's a legal wrinkle here. A court has actually questioned whether these tariffs are even legal, but that ruling is on hold. So what does this mean for you, practically speaking? It means you have to play both sides. You have to comply and pay the tariffs now as if they're here to stay, but at the same time, you have to save every single payment record, every document, because if these tariffs get overturned, you'll want to be at the front of the line to claim a refund. Okay, enough theory, let's get tactical. We've got our compass, so now we need a map. This is your step-by-step action plan for the next 90 days to mount an immediate, effective response. This is your roadmap. The first 30 days are all about defense. You need to visualize your total exposure and protect yourself. The next 30 days are for optimization. This is where you start planning shifts to lower-cost regions like the EU or Mexico. And by day 90, you move to implementation, actually restructuring your supply chain and pricing for this new reality. This is how you respond with speed and precision. Short-term fixes are absolutely vital, but the real win is in playing the long game. This next section is about moving beyond just surviving the storm. It's about building a global operation that's so resilient it can thrive no matter which way the wind blows. So let's be blunt. The fundamental challenge we're all facing is that the old model, produce everything in one low-cost country and ship it directly to the US, that model is now incredibly expensive and frankly just too risky. So the big strategic move here is a total pivot. It's about redefining your entire global footprint. Instead of thinking of your factories as serving just one market, you start thinking of them as strategic hubs. For example, your facility in India might have a high tariff for US-bound goods, but it can become an incredibly powerful hub for serving a bunch of other major markets around the world. And this is why that pivot is such a game changer. By manufacturing in India, you can tap into its free trade agreements to get favorable access to the UK, the UAE, and Australia, just to name a few. You're turning a defensive move away from the US market into an offensive expansion into new, profitable regions. It's a brilliant strategic judo move. This kind of thinking leads us to a more advanced concept, something called tariff engineering. This is not about reacting to tariffs after the fact. This is about being proactive. It's about designing your products and your supply chains from day one with customs planning baked right in. This is how you build a permanent cost advantage right into the DNA of your business. And one of the most powerful tools in that tariff engineering toolbox is the first sale rule. It sounds complicated, but here's the bottom line. This 4-step process lets you legally use an earlier, lower price in your supply chain as the value for customs. By structuring your deal with a middleman, you can declare that lower value and directly reduce your tariff payment. It's a huge opportunity. So let's pull all of this together. When you boil it all down, what's the final takeaway for you as a manager? It's really all about reframing this entire situation, not as a threat to be endured, but as an opportunity to be seized. In the short term, your job is simple: defend and adapt. You need to calculate your total cost exposure right now and immediately start running pilots on quick wins like the first sale rule to stop the bleeding. Then you shift gears. In the medium term, it's all about diversifying and pivoting. You build that flexibility with dual sourcing, so you're never again reliant on just one country, and you start exploring those new markets using strategic hubs like India. And finally, the long-term play, the ultimate goal, is to integrate and dominate. You want to get to a point where tariff engineering is so deeply embedded in your company's DNA that you can turn all this customs complexity into a powerful competitive weapon that your rivals simply cannot match. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. How can you take this tariff challenge, this massive headache, and transform it into the very catalyst that forces your company to build the smartest, most flexible, and most resilient supply chain you have ever had? We've given you the playbook to get started. For a deeper dive or some personalized guidance, please feel free to reach out to the experts at info@logistique-inc.com. Thanks for watching.